Governor Desantis touting the arrest and the dismantling of encampments at Florida universities in recent weeks, all while protesters shouted in the background.
Yeah, he was speaking over at the University of Florida this morning and vowed to keep order in the state. Our Capitol reporter Forrest Saunders joins us now live to paint the almost surreal scene we saw play out today. Forrest.
Yeah, guys, it really was an interesting split screen to watch. On the one side, you had Governor Ron DeSantis saying that we weren't going to tolerate that kind of behavior here in the Sunshine State, no disruption of graduations, no encampments. But then on the other side, just a few feet away, the very protesters that DeSantis was warning, trying to shout down his speech. Take a look. For yet another day, long live Palestine! This group of pro-Palestine protesters at the University of Florida demanding the school divest ties to Israel as the war abroad continues.
Disclose, divest, we will not stop, we will not rest.
Their shouts loud enough you could hear them feet away during Governor Ron DeSantis' press conference, an event called in part to cheer the detention of some from that very group days earlier.
This has kind of become a common occurrence. We don't do that here in the state of Florida, and so they did have an encampment, and it lasted about a few minutes.
For more than a half hour, DeSantis and other state ed officials denounced how UCLA, Columbia, and other schools have dealt with similar protests, some resulting in the disruption of graduations as demonstrators occupied buildings and grounds.
We're going to do it right. We're going to be focusing on academic rigor. We're going to be focusing on the pursuit of truth. We will not let the inmates run the asylum in the Sunshine State.
But members of DeSantis' own party think more could be done. State lawmaker Rep. Randy Fine says Florida's anti-Semitism laws aren't being used to the fullest, and he helped craft them.
And it's been a great source of disappointment to me. The legislation requires students who engage in anti-Semitic behavior to be treated the same way as students who engage in racist behavior. If someone was chanting the N-word walking through campus, they'd be gone in 30 seconds, as they should be.
That's as Florida's Council on American Islamic Relations denounces the governor for going too far already.
Free, free, free Palestine!
Recent student arrests at Florida State, UF, and USF, mixed with rhetoric conflating pro-Palestine protests with terror group Hamas, is chilling free speech, CARE says.
All that they are asking for are conversations to have in how they want their universities to be invested. And I feel they have a right to do that.
The request, a non-starter for Florida's University Chancellor Ray Rodriguez. During the AM press conference, he said there would be no appeasement or divestment by schools. And later, Rodriguez dismissed concerns that Florida officials were chilling speech.
You may have seen a very large crowd of students and outside campus agitators joining in to protest our very speech. None of them seem chilled, and that's my answer.
So what is next here? Well, likely those protests at college campuses here and across the country are probably going to continue. I mean, they seem very committed to that cause despite what you heard today. The question is, will we see some resolution? Maybe a ceasefire abroad will help ease some tensions back here at home. Guys?
Yeah, meanwhile, of course, the students are speaking on campuses all over the country and here in Florida. Did the governor today spell out anything as far as a penalty for protesting? Is he talking about suspension, expulsion, or loss of student loans?
I think that's all potentially on the table, depending on the kind of infraction that we might see. We've got several laws on the books, whether it's the anti-Semitism policies or some of the upper education policies that have been enacted by the bureaucrats here in the state of Florida. So, yeah, there is a threat of potentially losing grants, of loans, of suspension, and even criminal penalties, which could stretch all the way back to, if you remember, 2020, when we had those BML protests. Some of them turned violent. And then as a result of that, the legislature crafted what DeSantis calls the anti-riot bill. While some of that was struck down by the courts, other penalties that were heightened for violent protests still remain. So it just depends on how charging happens here, what kind of prosecution would be looked at, and what happens going forward.
Yeah, right. And we should point out not every protest is the same. They're all different on a case-by-case basis. Forrest Saunders live in Tallahassee tonight. Forrest, thank you.